Hey guys, just going to give it a few minutes, just finishing setting up, waiting for the stream to initialize. One sec peeps, just waiting for the stream to properly initialize now on Facebook, and then I will carry on. If you are there in the chat, please do say hello, let me know the stream's working. See a couple of people joining, just waiting for the stream to properly initialize now on Facebook, and then I will carry on. Right. Hi Don, hi Sai Owen, hi if you are there in the chat, please do say hello. Let me know the stream's working. See a couple of people joining, just waiting for the stream to properly initialize now on Facebook. And then good stuff. Right. Okay, so let's pause that. Excellent. Right. Hi everyone, good evening. How you all doing? Welcome to another YamYam Retro Gaming live stream. Not a very interactive one, this one of course, because I haven't got anybody to talk to because we're in lockdown. Partial lockdown anyway, and from what I understand from the news, it looks like we might be going to another one. So I'm making sure everything's going okay with my streaming setup here, because I've got a feeling over the next couple of months there's going to be a few more of these videos coming, just so I can fill my time. It's going to be a little bit depressing, but at least we've got our gaming to keep us company, haven't we? So I've been doing a lot of things during lockdown, and there's more stuff coming. And I've got something new to show for you today, which is pretty new to me as well. So I hope you can hear everything. I will adjust the volume on the TV if needed as we go along. If you are seeing a little bit of distortion on the screen there, it's only because of the artifacting of the video capture. That's all it is. I'll talk about all that as we go along. But hi Si, hi Ian Rockcliffe, hi Steve Erickson. How's it going, mate, up in Liverpool? Right, so what I'm talking about today then, guys, is the Texas Instruments TI-99 slash for a computer. And I'm just going to pick up the camera here and show you what we're looking at. Just zoom out. There we go. So this is the TI-99 4A. It's a system that came out in 1981. There was an original system called the TI-99, which was slightly less successful, that came out in 1979, and it didn't fare too well. So they brought out this successor to it, which was intended to take on the competition at the time, which would have been things like the VIC-20, the early Spectrums, obviously talking about the UK, and obviously the Commodore 64 and things weren't far behind in the Sinclair Spectrum. So it was, interesting fact, the first 16-bit HAL Micro to be released, even though it doesn't really take advantage of that 16-bit architecture. I've read up a little bit on it, and as I understand, it was kind of suffered a little bit because it didn't fully utilize the 16-bit gateway or something, so it operates a lot more like an 8-bit machine. However, it does have a few things which make the games a little bit more impressive. It has got inbuilt sprite handling capabilities. It's got expandability. It's got multi-channel sound effects. So you know, it's got quite a few features going for it. Another cool thing about it as well, as part of this setup here, you can see a couple of things. So it came with its own custom joysticks, which are a little bit strange. They remind me in some ways of, is it the Zippy Stick, this kind of strange palm-held controller you got for things like the Amiga and the Commodore 64. It's got this kind of curved base here. It's got the long stick and the single fire button, which I actually tend to hold. in a kind of left-handed style. It feels more comfortable for me. I'll show you a little bit more of that. It came with two of those joysticks, which are wired together in a single input, which goes into a standard 9-pin, I think it's an Atari style connector there. Don't quote me on that. I don't know if the pinout is identical, but you've just got the one port on there that runs the two sticks. A little bit annoying if you want to get replacement sticks for these, because not many people made anything that would have gone with that. But you can wire in, from what I understand, quite easily your own dual joypads to work like this, and works quite well. What was a little bit annoying though, and I'm just going to go around the back here, is around the back there you can see a few ports. So first of all, we've got a multi-video out port there. It's a 6-pin connection on the UK machines. It was only 5-pin on the American original machine, and it came with an external RF modulator box, which I haven't got plugged in because that's not a convenient way to do it. The American version, you can actually get a 5-pin to standard RCA out, which gives you your normal, red, white, and yellow outputs. Unfortunately, they didn't do that with the British one. The British one, they changed the modulator slightly for the PAL region, and unfortunately, you can't actually wire it that way. You actually have to make a custom piece of hardware to do that. What you can do though, and it's obviously a better picture and the next best thing, but slightly less convenient, is this is actually a 6-pin connection which goes to a component video out. I think the idea was they wanted you to use this computer with a monitor rather than TVs. Obviously, we don't really use monitors these days, but if you have got any TVs that have still got component input for their HD, you can actually use the component input, which gives you a pretty clear picture on an LCD screen. So quite happy about that. Can't really tell from a distance, but if I go in close, you can unfortunately see the vertical banding there, which is still a similar kind of effect you would get when viewing AV kind of consoles and stuff on an LCD TV through this kind of input. Bit of a shame, but at least the pixels are pretty clear and you get a nice clean picture, and you got your audio and everything straight through the TV. You've got this kind of bespoke power connector, which is a bit of a pain in the arse, because obviously if you haven't got the original power supply, it's not an easy thing to replace. You've got this big box thing here where both inputs come out the same side, and then it feeds into here. So I don't know if there are any third-party connectors available, because it uses a proprietary connection. And then to the side of that, you'll see another 9-pin port. Now, annoyingly, the tape player connection for this is what actually goes into that 9-pin port there. So when these things, excuse me, I'll drop my earpiece there for a second. Is because these aren't labelled, if you didn't know what you were doing, you could accidentally think that maybe that's the joystick port around the back. Plug your joysticks into it. I don't know if you do any damage, but it's not the kind of thing you want to confuse. So yeah, I haven't actually got the tape player plugged in because nobody wants to mess around with tapes these days, obviously. And with the TI-99, you had a couple of options when it came to the games. You could actually load things off tape. It's got a basic operating system, which I'm going to reset to now. So when you load up, you're presented with this, and if you jump into it, you can actually go straight into TI Basic, and just square that back up. There we go. So from here you can do your usual basic commands. Yeah, I'm tapping away and rather annoyingly there, but yeah, you've got your standard basic. You've got all your basic commands. Obviously, it's got its few own custom instructions with it being a 16-bit computer, but if you've used basic before, you know what you're doing on there. I don't know enough basic to mess around, to be quite honest, but there you go. You've got basic built into it. There is an extended basic you can actually load from the secondary port, which is the cartridge on this. This system has got a front-loaded cartridge port, which I think is a nice touch because, well, obviously tape loading was always going to be a problem in the modern age. It's not very convenient. It's not very nice. And obviously cartridges were instant loading. They obviously had this in mind as being both you know, a proper use computer and a game system. And that, you know, being like American oriented, they obviously they wanted to implement ROM cartridges from the start. A little bit too expensive for kind of foreign markets at the time. That's why we never really got disk drives or, you know, cartridge ports and stuff, as you know, weren't heavily used on British microcomputers, but on American ones they were. And rather than vertically orientated or sticking out the back, thankfully we've got a nice slot port there where it inserts into the front of the system, and it's got a nice little dust flap and everything on there that covers it up. A little bit dusty at the moment, I'm afraid. That's shown up really badly on the camera. I've cleaned this one up a little bit, but it has still got quite a few marks. You can see there's quite a few scratches on the top there, unfortunately. It's got like a kind of soft, like brushed aluminium shell, and it is very soft, unfortunately. This is quite easy to dent and very easy to scratch. I actually got this one like this, but the good news is this system actually cost me a grand total of nothing. Rather unfortunate circumstances, but advantageous as far as the collector goes. This is from a late friend of mine. A few of you out there know Stuart Williams. Obviously, a lot of his collection has been auctioned off following his passing last September. This TI-99 was actually part of his collection, and as it's a system I've never owned, and it's a system that we will put to good use at revival events, which is what he wanted us to do with all his equipment. I've retained this one. There was actually a second TI-99 in his collection, but that was fully boxed and complete, and I don't feel right owning that kind of stuff because I'm not a shelf collector. So that one actually was sold on eBay. I think that went for £100 in the end. A loose TI-99 like this is going to cost you in the region of 50 to £60, I would imagine, depending on what you get with it. The more things you get with it that are original, the more it will cost, obviously. Quite often things won't be included, like the joysticks, they'll have gone ages ago. You might not get an original power supply. Annoyingly, with it having the external RF box, if you haven't got that, you're a little bit screwed because you've got to kind of make one up, which is a little bit annoying, or modify the system internally, which isn't very easy to do from what I understand. But it came with a few things as well, which has helped me introduce me to the system, because I had no previous experience with this system before, and I'm glad I've been able to get this one, even though it's a little bit battered. This was the loose one he had in his collection, and I didn't even know if it was working, but a little bit of a clean up. I've cleaned it inside and out. It was full of dust. I've touched up some of the connections, and I've actually cleaned the joysticks. The pads on the inside where the directions and the buttons go were really worn and covered in carbon deposits and all kinds of rubbish. So I've taken those apart and cleaned those, and they work much better now. I've also cleaned underneath the keyboard, which wasn't responding properly. System's got a lovely keyboard. You got full travel keys here. They feel really nice to use. You know, unlike some of the systems. The system actually came with several different keyboards in its lifetime. I think the original keyboard for it was like a calculator style keyboard, what the Americans might call a chiclet keyboard. That obviously isn't ideal. Better than, you know, some of the like the Spectrum, the original Spectrum rubber key. It was a lot better than that from what I understand. But it didn't look all that, and it wasn't that great to use. Even though it's a really compact keyboard, I suppose the dimensions of this are probably, I don't know, about 9 inches across, I think it is for this keyboard. It's really comfortable to use. You haven't got external function keys. You've just got your kind of QWERTY keyboard with the numbers above. Um, and it works really well. You've got some shifted functions there. You can see on the front of the keys. You've got cursor keys on as a shifted function. Some games utilise those built in as standard controls for up, down, left, and right. Some of them use the arrow keys there on the comma and the full stop key instead. But there are also some shifted keys up on the top here, and you can actually change this insert. I think depending on what version of BASIC you're running, you can actually assign additional commands up there, and that's labelled quite handily for general use. I don't know if these little stickers or are actually printed on. These little circles on the front of there, they are actually painted onto the keys, so they're there by default. They're obviously of use to you if you're using the keyboard regular. So yeah, that's the system as a whole. The way we're using it now is obviously we don't mess around with keyboards. I certainly don't mess around with keyboards. I haven't got sorry with tape players. I haven't got time to mess around with tape players these days. They're too inconvenient. They're unreliable. They're always a bit of a problem to get things working fully the way they should be, especially if things wear out. And even though I do have a tape deck for this, it was actually knackered anyway, so I wouldn't have been able to use that. A lot of the games, when you bought them though, that a lot of them were made by TI themselves because there weren't many third-party developers who actually developed games for the system. They couldn't actually get it to kind of catch on, so they developed a lot of them themselves. And quite a few of the games would come in like a big box, and inside you would often get a cassette and a cartridge. So when you bought the software, you had two different ways to run it. Some games only came on tape, some games came with cartridge and tape. I think some were cartridge only, but I think you got a few with the system, and obviously there were a few more you could buy afterwards. Didn't have a great many releases for it in its lifetime. I think there's only about 100 or so games for it, but there's quite an active community converting games for it. I believe some MSX games were actually ported to this and vice versa, and from other platforms as well. I'm not entirely sure. Like I say, not as familiar with this system as I am with some of the others, and that's why it's great that I've been given an opportunity to get to grips with it in this way. So, looking at it, playing it today, you've got a few options. Obviously, you can buy the ROM cartridges. There's loads on eBay. Not as many as readily available as like your Spectrum or your Commodore or things like that. But as far as games for this system go, you will find a lot of cartridges. That's the best way to play them. You put the cartridge in before you power up. You power it up, and then from the menu you can see it says press any key to begin, and then you press the key, and then you get an option to go into basic or to load whatever the cartridge is. Now you can see that the cartridge I've got inserted on here is actually this system's modern flash device. Obviously that's the best way to load games on any system these days, because you've got instant loading. You can put loads of things on an SD card, and you can put them in that way. Setup for this card is a little bit more complex. The card itself is called the FinalGROM 99. It's an advancement of an earlier flash card that was made a few years ago, which I believe was called the I think it was just called the FlashROM 99. I think it didn't have quite as many capabilities as this. It only had, I think it was very limited as the type of software you could put on there. You could only load a couple of things on it at once. It wasn't as versatile as this, and it didn't have the added functions that this has got. You've got a couple of extra things on the cartridge here you wouldn't find on a normal cartridge. The cartridge shell here is very similar to a standard TI-99 cartridge, but on the top you can see we've actually got a reset button which soft resets the system, because the system hasn't actually got a reset button like a Spectrum or something has. It's only got a hard-wired power switch with an LED on the front there. So rather than flicking that switch on and off all the time, which obviously surges the power, you can just hit the soft reset, and if I do that, it just resets back to that screen there. There's also a second button on top there which actually resets the FinalGROM. That button there, because the way it works is once you load a cartridge image from the menu, it actually comes up with, it actually kind of loads that temporarily into the flash ROM. So each time you soft reset it after that point, it actually reloads. When you go to this menu, it will actually show the last game that you had up there. So if I load, for example, I go into this and I load up, let's find a random game. There we go. We load up 4A Flyer, top game. You can see it loads that up now. Now if I reset this by just hitting the reset key, it loads back. If I press the key here, you can see that on the menu there it just comes up as 4A Flyer. So it keeps that game loaded in memory. If you're just playing one game and you just want to keep resetting and starting again, that's very handy to do. However, if you want to change game, what you actually need to do is you actually need to power cycle it completely, or hit the reset, then reset the actual cartridge. You can see the LED flash on the front, And now when we go back into it, you can see it once again says 2 for FinalGROM 99. That loads the menu again. You can't just drag and drop ROMs onto this cartridge like you can with some others. However, a lot of that ball ache has been taken away from me because I believe this system was bought by Stuart originally, and I don't think he actually got much use out of it. It's an open source device, this. It isn't just manufactured by one person. There's a few different people making this board, but you have to pay extra to have the cartridge shell made up, to have the extra buttons put on it for reset and system reset. And it was actually supplied with two 4GB SD cards, which have got two different lots of software on. So Stuart had obviously ordered the whole shebang for this. So he'd ordered it with all this. So as well as the system, I mean, it might not be the cleanest TI-99 out there, but it's clean enough. And thankfully, I'd got the flash solution ready made. So it's a big thank you to a lost friend there for that, and something nice to add to the collection. But it was all set up for me. There are instructions online on how to set up your SD card. You have to use like a compiling tool to convert them to a certain format once you've got your ROMs. But I think there's people out there who've ready-made like images you can copy to your SD card to put onto your own SD card and set it up if you don't want to do it yourself. And to be honest, because there's not a ton of software out there, that's all you need. Once somebody set it up, it's set up nicely for you in the menus. It's easy enough to use. So let's have a look at some of the games then. I'm just going to square this up a little bit in my shot there as best I can. There we go, looks right. So we're going to the menu, and you can see we've got a few things in the menu here. We've got dev, we've got education, we've got games, homebrew, old compo, Rasmus, and tools. Not sure what's in the lower categories, to be honest. The main thing obviously we're going to care about is what's on there in terms of games. And if I jump into the games menu here, we can take a look at what we've got. So you can see at the top there's a few extra categories. There's actually a category there for 32K. By default, the system is 16K, so not massive amount of RAM on there. Obviously, that's going to limit the type of games it can do, even though it's got pretty decent capabilities. But you can get a 32K expansion module for this, and that obviously allows you to play the 32K games. If I go into that, you'll see that there's some games on there that look pretty familiar, and they'll give you a feel for the kind of thing you're going to be able to get on there. There's a port there of Jetpack, obviously, a very popular game on the Spectrum. There's also Miner 2049er. I believe there's a port of... On there, is that the only page? I think it's 2 pages. You've got Tutankhamun, Submarine Commander. Yeah, some slightly more advanced games on there anyway. But I can't play any of those because unfortunately I don't have the 32K expansion module. What I do have, however, and again this comes from Stuart's collection, is this, the speech synthesizer. Yes, a few systems had these back in the day with to various degrees of success. The one on this one's pretty good actually. I quite like the sound that it outputs. Again, only a few games that utilise it, unfortunately. But yeah, there's a few games that got pretty good speech on there, and I'll show you a couple of those as we go along. So that was something that, even though I sold on a lot of peripherals for this, I didn't sell that on because I thought, well, I'll get some good use out of this, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So if I go back to the top menu, because I can't play any of these guys, unfortunately, it just kind of goes to a blue screen if you try and load them. You need a 32K module to that. And we'll take a look at a couple of games on here. Now, I'll start with arcade ports because arcade ports are obviously the good benchmark for any system, because if you've seen them on other systems, you've got a basis for comparison as to what other systems are capable of compared to this. So we'll jump over and we'll start with Breakthrough. Now, Breakthrough is a variation on Breakout, obviously, the classic bat and ball game. And there's a couple of ways you can do it. There's Breakaway or there's Breakthrough. Breakaway is where you just kind of, a bit like Arkanoid or Breakout, you just chip away at certain bricks on the wall. Breakthrough, the ball actually passes through and destroys loads of bricks at once. It's just a variation on the game, to be honest. Either game's fine. They're controlled pretty well. Now, one thing I'm going to say about the TI-99 games, most of them do utilise joysticks straight out of the box. However, it's a bit hit and miss as to which joystick is actually like player one joystick, because they both use the same port. You can never know which one's which, and for each game it seems to be different. So you'll be holding one joystick ready to play your game, because a lot of them still require you to press a key to start the game. You don't know what joystick is actually player one's joystick until you actually get into the game and realise you can't control it. So I'll pick up one controller here and see if we've got the right one. We'll start with breakaway. We'll go with slow, which is still pretty quick, I can tell you now. And I don't know why you'd want to play with invisible tiles. That would be ridiculously hard. But off we go anyway. So I think I'll press fire. There we go. Yeah, I've got the right joystick because it allowed me to actually press fire to launch the ball. There's a lot of games where it just starts the game and you haven't got a clue if you're actually controlling it or not until you realise you're dead and something's hit you before you've had a chance to pick up the right joystick. And again, it's perfectly acceptable breakout clone. You know, it's same game. It controls really well. The fluidity, even though they aren't analog controls, they are digital. It controls really well. They aren't the best joysticks in the world, but thankfully after cleaning them up, they do control really well. Internally, the joysticks have got they use like a membrane touch thing, but rather than having like the carbon contacts on the back of a rubber pad, you've just got two sets of pads and then a big sponge liner that goes around the base of the joystick, and that's the only thing that controls the resistance of the joystick. That's why you can hear it squeaking a lot. And the same applies for the actual fire button as well. There's just a big sponge pad on the back of the thing there that presses the contacts down in two places. It doesn't, not the most, you know, tactile of feedback and not the most responsive controls, but at least cleaned up. When you do move everything around now, the contacts make better contact and you have actually got a bit more control. But you could hear then when I was moving it, I mean, it does a lot of, you can hear it squeaking around there. It's the plastic creaking, and the plastic's creaking more because obviously it's only held on by two screws. And because I've cleaned all the gunk away, that's probably been holding it together for 30 or 40 years. That's what's making it squeak a lot more. But so yeah, perfectly acceptable breakout clown there. We'll jump in and take a look at a couple more. Obviously nothing too much to hear on that one there. Must reset the GROM, forgot to do that. And let's have a look. Oh, how's it going, Pete? How's it going, Aaron? Sorry, guys, didn't see your comments there. We'll take a look at a couple more, and we'll go with Defender. Now, Defender is actually a very good port. Defender, not a game I'm a big fan of on the arcade because I cannot stand the controls. I just can't get to grip with the arcade controls on Defender. I hate the way it's laid out, and it's never been comfortable. The home ports, however, like the Atari 2600 port, is fantastic because you're just using the joystick left and right to control your left and right movement. It's a lot easier to control. I mean, yes, it's easy because it's a home port, but it just feels so much better in your hand and a lot more fun to play. And this controls very much the same way. Not as fast as the 2600 version, but let's give this a try anyway. So, I mean, slightly jerky scrolling on this compared to certain other ports, and you do stop dead, unfortunately. There's no inertia on your craft, so when you stop moving, you just stop dead, if you know what I mean. But it does control really well. You can see what's going on. You can see the enemy characters. You can see the little guys that are floating around. You can see the enemy fire. The flare effects of things like the 2600, that's all multicoloured, or like the Midway Arcade original, sorry, the Williams Arcade original, it can be a bit hard to see enemy fire. On this, it's all a uniform colour and quite easy to see. And you can see we've got a pretty good, pretty serviceable version of Defender there. You've got your little mini-map at the top, just like the arcade version, which does update pretty well. Collision detection's pretty good. Graphics aren't that colourful, but you know, I think that's to its advantage. So, perfectly serviceable game of Defender there. Again, we'll reset it, reset the GROM, and let's jump into another of my arcade. This is one of my arcade favourites, and it's a Dig Dug. Now, Dig Dug, of course, has got the quite famous music which plays along as you move your character. It's like his own little soundtrack as you move along. And thankfully, this is the same joystick for all of these. I'll probably have to switch a few times as I go to the other ones. Press plus to select difficulty, press fire, but yeah, stick with basic. I'm crap at Dig Dug anyway, but so here we go. It's very blue, as you can see, not an awful lot of colour on this game. Now on this, unfortunately, the music does just play away. It doesn't carry on with the character, so it just plays away anyway. But you can see what's going on. All the familiar enemies are there. Oh, they're going to get me. Level 1 on this, they always get to you really quick. But I'll get them all before they go, hopefully. Yep, 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 yep. Ah, that one got away from me, unfortunately. You can hear the joystick creaking a lot, I'm sure, while I'm playing this. It does kind of play havoc on your hands after a while. I'm sure there are better condition controllers out there than these ones, but I'm just making do with what I've got. And if they clean up in the work, that's fine for me. You know, it's only casual play for me. This not a kind of system I'm going to invest like oodles of time in, so I don't need the very best controls. Perfectly serviceable. Let's try and get him before he runs off. Gotcha. Actually got him all that time. I'm happy about that. Very strange palettes you'll notice on this system. You know, the Spectrum is notable for having, you know, a very bright rainbow neon palette of slightly limited colours. The Commodore, of course, having a very muted beige and brown kind of palette, if you know what I mean. The Amstrad kind of being a weird hybrid of the two. This has a very weird palette indeed. It doesn't seem to like to want to do black properly, so for a lot of the backgrounds they use this really like dark navy blue, which is what you see in there, rather than true black for the backgrounds. And it doesn't tend to use a lot of true whites either. You've got these kind of muted tones. Almost looks like you've got like a blue mask over everything, and I found that for a lot of the games. A little bit strange, but it does work for some games. So that's Dig Dug anyway. I mean, by now you're getting a feel for obviously how this shapes up compared to other micros of the era. And I'll just show you a couple more, and then I'll show you a couple of the dedicated games for this system. So we'll go to one of the best ones on here. It does crash occasionally, this one. I don't know if it's I did have a problem when I first hooked this system up, in that the GROM cartridge, in fact any of the cartridges, weren't making solid contact with the connections, and it either wouldn't recognise the cart, would crash the cartridge, would crash the game, I'd have to reset. And I found out there was quite a big problem with these, and I'll just show you this now. On the inside of the cartridge port there's actually a gate, and inside this gate it has this kind of this black plastic section here, which had like a felt liner just on the inside. And I guess the idea was that the felt liner, as you insert the cartridge, would actually clean off any like metal shavings or metal filings or any debris that was left on the actual cartridge to make better connection. However, the problem was this felt cartridge is impregnated with like a sort of oil-based lubricant, and I guess the idea was to clean and lubricate, and ensure any tarnish went every time you inserted a cartridge. The problem is that over time that stuff has become nasty. It's like old grease, and every time you put a cartridge in, it just dirties the contacts really badly of both the port inside there and of each individual cartridge. So I was cleaning the cartridges and nothing was really happening. So in the end I had to take the whole TI apart, which I was going to do for cleaning anyway, But rather than being like most computers where you'd unscrew the bottom and the top would lift off as you'd expect, the bottom comes off and then the whole like computer, you've got the motherboard at the back, the power supply at the front, the keyboard section, they're all actually mounted to the top of the case instead. So you actually have to flip it over and undo everything to get to the cartridge port. And then the cartridge port itself, a little bit like the NES edge connector, uses like an L-shaped connector that plugs into the top and then has got the cartridge on like an extension that comes out like that. And then that sits on the end of it. So what it actually says to do on a lot of the advice forums is to actually remove this part because it can get in the way, or at very least remove the felt. What I've done is I took it out to remove the felt and actually forgot to put it back on. So I don't know if it'd actually be a hindrance or not. What I might do once I've done with this video is I'll take this apart again rather annoyingly. I'll pop that back on. I can't do it through the cartridge port. It's a little bit too fiddly. I'll get that back on, but at least the felt part's gone now. It's easy to clean the contacts enough with 100% alcohol, so there's no need for that felt thing. All that happens is it just falls apart. You end up with dust and grease and all kinds of stuff ruining your contacts. The contact still isn't 100% with this cartridge port, and occasionally I have to wiggle the port around to get it to make full contact. But one of the games I noticed that crashed quite a lot was this, so I don't know if it's just a bad ROM. But we'll try it anyway because it's one of the best games on here. And it's Moon Patrol. Oh, I love this game in the arcades. I actually surprised people when I showed the Sword M5. One of the very first videos I did actually, nearly 2 years ago now, on the YamYam channel. The Sword M5 computer has got a fantastic port of Moon Patrol on there, but it's not very colourful. It doesn't look. I mean, it's really good, but it's a little bit blocky, and it doesn't look as close to the arcade. Plays really well. This version a little bit slower than the Sword M5 version, and slightly questionable collision detection, I'll be honest. However, the graphics and everything, you can see there you've got parallax scrolling going on. The graphics themselves are actually very close to the arcade proportions, so let's have a go. We've actually got music on this one. A little bit of a crappy rendition of the arcade music there, but it's a bit more subdued during the game, thankfully. Oh, yeah, not very good animation when you go down a pit, but like I say, these joysticks really don't make it easy, unfortunately, for games like this. But let's see if we can get along a little bit. I found you have to jump quite a bit earlier than you would do, than it looks like you should do. And you can see the collision detection there with the bullets is slightly questionable on the aliens, but it works well enough. Oh. Do love this game in the arcade. I might have to build myself a dedicated Moon Patrol because I love this game. They used to have it in the working men's club that I grew up, spent most of my Saturday evenings in. They used to have it on an upright machine there and I absolutely loved it. One of the first games as well that allowed you to actually continue your game. If you actually died, you were allowed to continue where you left off, which is a new thing for arcades at the time. You can actually shoot the bullets out the sky, which is a good thing, but positioning to do that is not the easiest thing to do. Let's see if we can reach at least the first goal. If I can get to E, I'll be quite happy. Yeah, no explosion animations, unfortunately. But then again, I guess you can only fit so much into 16K. But I made it anyway. So yeah, that is one of the best arcade ports on here. And I'll just take a quick look and see if there's any more. One thing I will mention, and it was something actually someone commented on. I think it was Steve Day commented on the other day. They used to call this area of the machine here the toaster. What it is, it's a little bit dusty there. Sorry, excuse the oil off my hands. The power supply is actually mounted just under there, and the power supply gets extremely hot. I think the reason they left that space blank and very thin intentionally was just so it would dissipate the heat a little bit better. But as I feel it now, if I touch this here, I mean, that is like extremely warm. You'd be worried about it starting to melt the plastic. It never does. I mean, I've not seen any systems where it's happened to happen like that, but yeah, that part there gets very hot. And if you didn't know that it was a problem, you would be a bit concerned to feel that. Let's put that back in frame, and then I'll show you a couple of others here. Should do. There we go. Should do nicely. Right. Let's see what else we've got on here then. You can see obviously not a million games on this list. The 32K games do add to it somewhat, and some of the homebrew games do as well. Unfortunately, most of the homebrew, unfortunately, has been made for 32K, so I can't really show any of the homebrew. Most of the ones I tested said on there when you try and load it, you need a 32K cartridge in order to run them, so there's no point in me trying to show you any homebrew. I might try and get a 32K module for this at some point. But you know, this was just what I had to hand. This was what obviously I got from Stuart, and I'm really pleased I've got a new system to use. Yeah, we'll show you Centipede. Centipede is a fantastic port. It is super slick, super fast, looks really good, got slightly annoying sound effects, but it is every bit as good as the arcade original. And even though you haven't got true analog control on this, the actual character ship moves so smoothly. It's very much like the arcade version. So let's go. Oh, I've actually picked up the right joystick. I've switched joysticks now. It's actually the right joystick. So you do have to press enter to start though. Thankfully on this you don't have to be tapping this button, because that would be a nightmare on this game. Because if you tap the button you just can't fire fast enough, it misses inputs. You can just hold down the button and it just fires away on auto fire. There you go. And it feels as slick as the arcade, you know, when it cuts through the mushrooms. The animation of the Centipede itself, not quite as smooth as the arcade, but the movement of the ship is, and that's what matters, you know. And you can see on here, obviously on the arcade, the background would generally be black on most stages. Most backgrounds on this are this kind of navy blue colour. I don't think the system couldn't do black, or whether it just chose not to use it as a colour, but yeah. Oh, I can usually knock out a couple of levels on this, not doing too good today. Yeah, definitely Steve. Steve says they're good for keeping your coffee warm. Yeah, I don't think I'd trust leaving my drink on there though. I'll have another quick game of that, see if we can at least get past one stage. Wasn't a very good show. But yeah, I do enjoy playing this. It feels quite natural with the joystick on this, because it's very soft the way it rolls round. You feel like you get a good tactile response on this game for it. Again, I guess it's down to programming. They didn't have many third parties work on these. If they had more people working on the third party, they might have been able to accomplish some really good stuff with tricks like you saw on other home micros at the time. I hate it when they all get trapped up one corner like that. The sound of that spider is very annoying. That's 2 centipedes taken down. Let's see if we can get one more. Oh, broken into too many parts. It's going to be dangerous. Up, down. Come on. Yes. Oh, now I've got the vertical centipede drops. Go away, spider. Oh, there's a lot coming. Ah, I know I'd cop for it there. I got my game face on. If it looks like I've got rather a stern face, because moving this joystick is not an easy task. Not the easiest thing in the world to grip. You can't kind of grab it with a full hand. You can't get a good grip on it with a couple of fingers. It's quite stiff. But I'd rather play this on a joystick than on a keyboard. I mean, ideally you'd have a trackball or something to control it, but I don't know if there is an analog control for this system to do that with. So that's pretty cool port there. So I'll show you a couple of TI, dedicated TI games. Like I say, there weren't many super standout games. A lot of the dedicated games for this system, I wasn't a massive fan of. Um, they're not really up my street. They're very basic. I mean, if I just pick one at random off the first page, I think we got Connect 4 or something on here. Yeah, I mean it's very basic. It's the kind of stuff you would expect to have seen programmed in BASIC, but this was like a commercial release. So, I mean, what can I say? I mean, it's Connect 4. So, yeah, okay. So this is one that actually uses the cursor keys printed on the keys here. Pick a spot, enter to drop. Computer has a go. It's Connect 4, you know what I mean? Gonna say. But this is the kind of stuff I'd expect seeing programmed in BASIC on a Spectrum. You know, the very first games that come out, like chess. You know, that was quite a famous one, fit into a very small amount of memory. Can't imagine this took up a lot of space. When you've only got 16K to work with, that's plenty. You watch me lose to a computer at Connect 4 now. Let's see what he does next. Yeah, I'm bored with that now. So yeah, it's Connect 4. So I'll show you a couple of the games that this system is famed for. And these are a couple of games that actually use a speech synthesizer, so that'll be quite nice. Turn up so you can hear it. First one is a game called Alpina. Now this game is something that was, I think, exclusive to this. Quite cool. I mean, it doesn't animate particularly well. It only uses basic characters, but you know, it's a bit different. And all you have to do, you're just like a mountaineer. You have to climb up the rock face of a mountain, and just so you know, in terms of based on base of reality, it takes about 15 seconds to climb Everest. So not the most realistic thing, but the speech synthesizer, quite a cool thing to have on this. Does quite a lot of talking to you, more talking than I do. So, we pick our mountain, and we'll go with Everest because it's the biggest there. Can you hear that? It says onward and upward. And you'll hear a few more bits as I try and climb the mountain. Quite easily play this with a keyboard, I imagine, but I'm using the joystick. You have to find the right paths. I don't think you can get over some huge gaps in the rock work there. But you've got to avoid the tree stumps, the full trees, the snakes. There's even bears, but there's also things that fall down as well. Like that. And they'll knock you down, so you've got to avoid those. You have to be careful with the grizzly. Beware, falling object. There we go. And then you got another try, and you just got to try and be faster. Whoa! But the more stages you do, depending on what order you go in, the more difficult it is. There's you see little creatures coming across there. Looks like a skunk. Watch out! Look out! Watch the snake. Did it? As simple as it is, it's quite addictive. You could stick with this for quite a long time, to be honest. And the speech synthesizer is actually pretty good. It's not overpowering like it is on some systems. It's not too muffled. You also find some speech synthesis is very muffled. Ma Mountain lions. Oh, hit by the bricks. And down we fall. I think if you fell 2,000 meters down a rock face, you'd be fucked.
Getting tired already? Watch out.
How's it going, Mike? You alright, mate?
Watch out. Yeah.
You can always watch this back if you want to see what I've covered so far. I'm just determined to make it to the top of this place. Ah, oh, shit. Yeah, I'll give up. I'll quit very easily. I've been no good mountaineering. And the other one I wanted to show, which is the speech synthesizer, is a game called Parsec. Barry, if you're still watching, this game's right up your street because you like your horizontal shooters. So we'll jump across this, and again, this uses the speech synthesis module to good effect. Wherever it is, there you go, Parsec E. If it loads, there we go.
Fire to begin. Alert. Alien craft advancing. Great shot, pilot.
So it's a little like, I don't know, cross between Defender and Nemesis, maybe. Best way to describe it. You're slowly scrolling across, but unlike scrambling that, you can actually control your thrust, which is quite gentle, backwards or forwards. You can't just hold, you can hold down the fire button to shoot, but you can't continue to hold it down, else your laser overheats. You can see my ship flashing there. That's when my laser's overheating. I was doing better at this earlier. Just got to kind of go in little bursts to defeat it. Oh, that was fast. Got that one that time. Slowed right down this time. Whoa! So yeah, again, this is another game that uses the speech module to good effect. I think there's a few more games that do use it, but those are two of the better ones that I know for a fact. And I mean, if I had more time now, I'd probably put quite a bit of time into playing those. Absolutely love them. But yeah, I think that's as far as I can go with that for now, because it's absolutely wrecking my hands playing this. My hand's gone red actually on the underside where I'm trying to grip it, because what I'm actually doing is I'm kind of palming it with my right hand like that, and then moving the stick like that, and then using my right thumb to press the fire button, and it just wrecks your hand after a bit. I prefer a joystick that's stuck to a table or on a solid wooden panel like an arcade control panel, but you know, that's just me. But anyway, yeah, that's the TI-99. As a system, yeah, I'm a pretty big fan of it actually. I'm quite impressed because not many systems had, you know, full expandability like that. I know like the Spectrum had like modules and stuff you could plug in, but they were mostly just shitty interfaces, you know, for things like micro drives and, you know, random stuff. Having the built-in cartridge port on this, I think, was a great idea. The two joysticks into one port thing, I don't think was the best thing. And even though the case, I'm sure, was very futuristic for the time, unfortunately, it does mark very easily, which is a bit of a downer when it comes to preservation of these things. If you got it fully boxed, I suppose that would help, but that doesn't help me now when this one's obviously been out of its case for quite some time. There's a lot more dust showing on the camera than I can actually see in real life. So whether I've got the gamma turned up a little bit high, I'm not sure. But yeah, things like the speech module, pretty cool thing to have. I will hang on to that. And obviously, if you're a big fan of actually programming directly on the system, this keyboard is fantastic. I think you'll really enjoy writing in BASIC on this. If you've never owned a TI before, or you've not had much exposure to it like myself, I do recommend you, if you've got the money to do so, give it a try. Like I say, you can pick one of these up now. If you're shopping around, you can pick one of these up for about 50 quid, I would imagine, if you just want something basic. Probably less if you get it with less peripherals, but if you are going to buy one, do make sure that you get one with a power supply and that does have a working RF modulator at the very least. If you've got a TV that can do it, I do recommend that you do get the component cable for it, because obviously you're going to get a nice stable picture like I've got there. And even though you do have to suffer slightly with the vertical banding, that's not too big a problem. At least you get a nice stable picture to play with, and you can ignore that banding after a little while. I'm sure there's a few things you can do to kind of mask that banding. Some of the TV options, to be honest, I reckon if I messed around with the settings on this TV, I could probably hide that banding by using a noise blur or something like that. But because I'm not going to be using the system with this TV necessarily very often, I'm not going to mess around with those settings right now. But if you're going to do that on a single system back home, then obviously you can set it up ideally for the way you've got it. But yeah, I'd recommend picking one up. I'd recommend giving it a try. The final G-ROM, depending on what iteration you get, don't fuck around with tape decks. Nobody wants to mess around with tape decks and stuff now. They're unreliable. They're flaky for the most part. Get yourself something like this, and you'll be able to enjoy all the games it's got to offer. You can buy it as a bare cartridge, a bare board to insert in there, but that's obviously not the best way to do it. Get yourself one with a shell, or get your own shell, take it apart, and insert it in there. But obviously, then you'll have to find a way to integrate some buttons. But yeah, definitely pick one of these up. I think you can buy them now for around £60. There's a few people on like Etsy and Sell My Retro who are making and selling these things. I think the original person who did it's still making them. Might end up running to about £100 fully assembled and everything right now, if you want like the SD cards and it fully done like this. But yeah, I mean it's worth it, because the games for this system, you're looking anywhere between £5 and £20 for each game on this system box. So you might as well just plump for it, get this straight away, and then you've got access to all the software. Like I say, a lot of games now won't hold up particularly well, so at least when you've got access to something like this, you can play all of the games, and then once you've found your few favourites, you're laughing because you've only spent like what, £60–80 to get them all. And obviously it's a lot more reliable than the old software itself, and this is just the way I prefer to do it. Yeah, watch your back, Mike, when you get a chance. Dave, yeah. I mean, watch your back to see what my take is on it. There are some good games for the system, and it's a nice little piece for me to add to the collection. I don't think we generally have a TI-99 out at the events very often, and thankfully now we've got one. So at the next revival, you'll see, whenever that might be. A lot of people have been asking, by the way. It's looking less and less likely that November's going to happen, guys. We've been told now we're going to be going to another lockdown, and that they've said that places can't take Christmas party bookings, so you know what that means for venues. So November is unfortunately looking a lot less likely now. But you can be sure at the next revival that we do, obviously we will have this TI out there, because I don't think any of the other team have got one. So this TI-99 will be out with the speech synthesizer. You can have a play around with it for yourself. But yeah, I mean, if you've got the money now, pick yourself one up, jump on eBay. There's usually a couple floating around on there. If you want to, pick up the American version. At least with the American version, you can still use the final G-ROM 99. And you don't have to fuck around with trying to get NTSC RF working. You can get yourself a straightforward 5-pin connector straight to RCA if you want the most simple connection for it. If you do find a UK one like I've got here, you can get the component cable for the best possible image. I think there's an S-video conversion thing you can get for the American one. But let's face it, you want simplicity of connection, and no one wants to mess around with RF, it's just naff. So, yeah, the component cable and the British version are probably the best way to go. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. it's a new system to me. I'll definitely be playing around with it a little bit more before I'm finished with it for a while. And I'll be back in a couple of days because I've got a few more things to show. In fact, one of them is right there in the background of this. I've actually fitted the GC loader plug and play to my GameCube there, and I'll be showing that in a video coming up another day. Probably might be on the weekend, might be next week now, but yeah, I'll definitely be showing that off. But I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. I'm going to go off and have my tea now. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Take it easy and stay safe. See you later.